Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and welcome back to our Unity RPG tutorial series. Okay, so last time out, we created animations for our player so they can move up and down and left and right to the world, all as much as he wants to. But no matter which direction he moves, he's always going to be facing down afterwards. So we need a way to make him face in a direction after he moves, and we also want to make sure our animator doesn't get crazily out of control and crazy complicated. So what we need to do first is create some new animations for him facing different directions. So what we're going to do, we want to make sure we're going into the animation folder, and we're going to do an animation called player face down, and drag that guy because he's the only one in there. We only need have one animation. We will create another new one called player face. We'll do up next. So player face up, we'll just grab the first one there again. So then he'll be looking up like that. So we hit play just to make sure that it's working just the way we want. Then we will do player face right. Scroll down here to find the guy facing right. So we'll just scroll it down a little bit further as well. And then finally we will do player face left. And we'll drag that and pop that in there. Okay, so now we got 4 new animations that we want to use. If we go back to our animator, if we hold Alt and click and drag, we can see we've got 4 new animations added. And like I was saying, if we wanted to start using these now, what we could do with the existing setup we have is make another arrow from here. So when we stop moving, it goes to player face down, and then goes back to check and see which direction it should move to after that, if there's any input happening. But then we start ending up with a big huge pile of messy what are they called, animation blocks all around the place, and that's not really very helpful for us at all. So what we're actually going to do is just delete all of these things here. I'm just going to delete all of them for now. And although we've set up these previous animations like this was kind of just to get the basic general gist of how these animations work. So what we're actually going to do is delete all of these as well, just like this. So okay, perfect. So we know we're still going to use move X and move Y to get when our player is moving, but we also want to know what has happened when our player stops moving. So what happens if we just press play here, just as an example, on our animator here, we can see when we hold left or right, we got 1 and -1, and move up and down, we got 1 and -1. But then when we let go, it returns to 0 every time, and that's not going to be very helpful to tell us which direction the player was facing when they let go of a direction being pressed. So we're going to need 2 more variables, 2 more floats. So again, we hit the plus and select float, and we're going to say last move X, and another float, last move Y. So that'll let us know whether what the last button pressed was once we set that up in our script. Obviously, it doesn't magically know how to do it by now, but we're also going to want to know in our animator whether the player is currently moving or whether he's not moving. So we're going to do another thing here. If we hit the plus symbol, we're going to select a bool. And so we haven't encountered bools yet, but bools are basically a variable that can be either true or false. That's all it can be. It can be either on or off. So we're going to call this one player moving. And we can just hit this little checkbox to say it's checked if it's true, and if it's not, it's false. So that's basically how bools work. They're very straightforward. So now we've got a few little options for our player here. So before we start looking at writing script for handling our last move and all that stuff, we want to actually get the basics of our normal movement back in action. So we deleted all those animations away, and now we're going to do a thing called a blend tree to handle our animations. So what we're going to do is, if you right click and go to create state and we're going to say from new blend tree. So it creates it in here as the blend tree, and we're going to go up here to rename it, and we'll call this just call it player movement, and then we're going to double click on that into here. Okay, so now we've got a blend tree, and we've got some things set up by default. So by default it's taken in move X as a value, so we know we have move X and move Y here, but that's not really much use to us. We want to use move X and move Y, and just having move X here by itself is no good, so we need to get move Y going as well. And the way we can do that is if we go to blend type up here, at the moment it's set to 1D, and that just means one dimensional basically. So we want to do 2D simple directional. So now we've got two options, two parameters here. We've got move X, and we're going to drop this one down and select move Y. So now we've got move X here that we can adjust, and move Y that we can adjust. So basically we know that we're able to access our move X and our move Y variables here, and we want to use them to determine what our animations will be. And the way we can do that is by hooking them up here in our blend tree. So what we do is hit this little plus symbol here, and we're going to add a motion field, and in where it says none here for a motion, we're going to click on the little circle beside it, and what that'll do is open up all the animations that exist in our project at the moment. So we know we want to use our movement ones that we have here, so we'll go with move down first, and we know that our move down should become active when our move Y is at -1. So if we go here and get to position Y and set that to -1 like that, we know that'll be the setting for when our Y movement is occurred. So we're going to add another plus here and add another motion field, and this opens this extra little graph here, and that'll become obvious now in a second once we start hooking up some more animations. So next we're going to go player move left, and when we're moving left we know that our X is going to be -1. So there we go. Now we suddenly have our down one being here at -1 and our left one being here at -1x. So let's do the other animations as well. So we're going to add another motion, and again this time we're going to go for a right, and the X on that is going to be 1. So you can see the shape kind of forming here, and we add one final one, and this will be player move up. Double click that. That's when our Y is at 1 like that. So now we can see we've got a whole big field of movement, and this little circle here, this red dot, we can see as we move it around here in our animator, those numbers are changing. So whenever this represents what our X and our Y values are currently. So if our move X is going up, it'll move up to here. If our move Y is going, or sorry, that was move X, or sorry, that was move Y. If our move Y is going up, we'll go up to here. If move X is going up, it'll go over here, or all around the place in various different areas like that. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to happen. We're just going to set this back to 0 like that. And as you can see here, if we hold Alt and drag over, we've got all our animations here have been set up within our blend tree. So now if we hit play, actually no, this won't work yet. Sorry, so stop that. So we're within our blend tree. If we go back to base layer here, and we're just going to set this as our default for now, and we hit play, and what we should get is our player. Again, he's doing his normal default walk, the same thing we had last time, but if we start moving around, we get our player moving the exact same way we want him to every single time. So that's perfect. That's exactly how we want our movement to work, and that's kind of perfectly ideal. So now we need to set up how the player will face in the right direction, and that's basically going to involve another blend tree. If we create a new blend tree here, and this will be, we'll call this if we go up here, we'll call this idle face. So that's just whatever direction he's facing. We go back in here again. This is going to take two inputs, which will be our last move X and our last move Y. So we're going to set that here, last move X and last move Y. We're going to add our 4 motions again. We hit our little circle. This time, instead of doing move all the directions, we're going to do face the directions. So he'll face down if our Y was -1. He will face left if our X was -1. He'll face right if our X is 1. And then finally he'll face up if our Y is 1. And we want to make sure that our X is 0. Like that. Okay, so now we've got the exact same situation going on here. We've got all our things set up, and if we look at our blend tree, all those facings are set up nice and handy dandy. So if we go back up to base layer, we're going to delete this player idle one because we're not using that anymore. And the way we're going to transition between these two statements is if the player is moving, he'll want to be in this section. So that's why we set up this little player moving bool here. But if the player is not moving, we want them in idle. So we're going to set up, if we right click on our player movement, we're going to make a transition over to idle face. And we're going to set the condition down here, player moving true. So, player moving false. So if the player isn't moving, then we want to work out which direction he should be facing based on the last move X and last move Y. And then we'll go the opposite way back to player movement, and we will say player moving. When player moving is true, then we want it to start walking in a different direction. And we want to make sure, like we did in the last video, turn off exit time, turn off fixed duration, and set the transition duration to 0 on both of those things. So we turn off all of those. So perfect. So now we've got our animator set up. We need to just be able to tell the animator what our last move was in either direction and whether our player is currently moving. And the way we'll do that, of course, is with the script for the player. So we'll go in and open it up here. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so we already know how to get access to our animator. We've set all that up. So now we're going to need to access last move X, last move Y, and player moving. So we're going to need to create another private variable. This time it's going to be a private bool. So as we know, as we said earlier, a bool is just a true or false thing. So a private bool that we'll call that player moving as well, just to keep things nice and simple. And we're also going to create no, not a public, private vector2. So last time out, or not last time, in the second episode, we used a vector tree to get the input direction of the player, which is an X, Y, and a Z value. But we don't need to worry about any Z values. We do want an X and a Y here. I mean, we could go and create two little float values of last move X and last move Y, but why make two things when you could just make one that can hold two different numbers? So that's our vector2. We'll just call this last move to keep things nice and simple, and that's just going to have an X value and a Y value. Okay, so we want to determine whether the player is moving first of all. So if the player is moving, we know that the player is moving only when an input is being taken in. So basically, if we've got an input, then we know, okay, so the player will move then, and we know that at this point our player moving should be equal to true. And we'll say the same thing if there's an input on the y-axis, player moving is equal to true. So that makes sense. But then at what point is the player moving false? So we know that our player moving is false when there's no input being pressed in. So we could add another if statement here to say that the player movement is false. But a simple and more straightforward way is just at the very start of the update loop here, just to say player moving is equal to false. So basically what will happen is at the start of every frame, it'll say, okay, player movement is false. Then it'll check and see, is there any input happening at the moment? And then if there's not, it'll at the end of all this here, it'll know the player movement is false, but if there is, it'll switch it over to being true. And that'll happen every single time so that we know that it's always up to date whether the player is moving. And then we can send that information to the animator. So we can, if I can type, we can say anim.setBool, and the bool we want to access is the one called player moving. And we want to make sure that, of course, that player moving is written the exact same way as it is here, with all the exact same capital letters and everything, or else it won't work the way we want it to. So player moving, and the value we want to give it is our player moving bool. So we'll close that bracket and put a semicolon in there like that. Okay, so we have that working just fine. But what about our last move position? Basically, what happens is, so here is when if we've got some input going on, then our player is told to move. But if there's no input going on, there's nothing happening. So we know that within these loops is when we're setting any kind of movement related stuff. So in here, for example, in our horizontal movement one, we know that our X movement is actually having something happening. So here we can say last move is equal to a new vector2 new vector2 and then a bracket, and we want the X value we want to stick into the last move will be whatever our current input.getX as raw is. So we'll copy that and paste that in there, and then the Y value we can just set that to 0 because we don't care if our player is moving left or right. We don't care if there's any Y input going on. That's all that really matters. And then the same thing with our Y input down here. We can just say last move is equal to new vector2. This time we'll have 0 for the X value, and on the Y value we'll have, if we just copy this, input.getX as raw vertical, paste that in there like that, close our bracket and hit our semicolon. So now we have our last move being set whenever the player is putting an input in, but unlike when the input is released and our player stops moving, we won't have an extra input being put in whenever we won't have an extra last move being put in when there's no input happening. So our last move will always stay greater than 0 basically. So we want to send that information back to the animator as well. So we'll say anim.set float. There we go. So first of all, last move X, and the value, not lands move, that's not how you spell those words at all. Last move X, and the value we want to send into that is from our last move vector2 last move dot X. So that's the X value from our vector2. Then we want to do the exact same thing here. anim.setFloat last move Y this time from last move dot Y, like that. Excuse me. Okay, so we've got our last move dot Y set there. I don't know why that's looking red. Have I missed something? I don't think I have. Okay, we just save that. Oh, it's because that's not a capital M, that's what it is. I knew there was something funky going on. Okay, so we'll save that, and now we have our player movement being set and our last move X and Y being sent at the exact same time. So if we go back in here now, we'll let that compile down the corner with the spinny icon, and once that's all going, we're going to hit play. And now, if it's all working according to the way it should be, we get our player facing down, we can walk down, and then it goes back to idle. If we walk up, we're facing up. If we walk left, we're facing left. If we walk right, we're facing right. So now, that's a much simpler way to have our animations in place. And obviously, if you were doing something with like 8 directions of movement, you could do lots of different things as well. But we're keeping it nice and simple with just 4 directions. And our animator is way tidier now. Rather than what we started off the episode with, which was like 5 blocks here all arranged in a circle. Now we've just got 2 blocks, and within them we've got a set of values all being worked out. So it's much handier, much simpler, and works a lot better for our player. So there you go. That's the basics of animating our character, all done and working nicely. And eventually we're going to start adding some attack animations and stuff like that, and we'll do that by adding some more just like another blend tree down here. And then we, instead of having a huge big spiderweb mess of animations, we've got 3 simple little things, and it's much easier to keep a track of. Next time out, we're going to take a look at moving our camera in the world. So at the moment, our player is walking around and he's just kind of wandering around all over the place. He could walk off the screen, and that's not very good for us at all. So we're going to make a camera that can follow the player around and be actively involved in the world that's going on around him. We're also going to take a look at fixing these lines that are appearing on the ground, which are no good to us at all. If we maximize it, we can see we get different things. They'll be really aggravated by, if we get the camera here, you can see we get a little preview down in the corner. If we start moving this camera, those lines start jumping and jittering around all over the place, and that is something we definitely don't want happening. So next time we're going to take a look at fixing those and getting our camera following our player. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I will be back soon with some more RPG tutorial goodness. Thanks for checking out this episode, and if you want even more Games Plus James goodness, make sure you hit those subscribe and like buttons. You can also find me on Twitter and Facebook by following the links on screen, where you can find out all the latest news about the channel. And if you want to help support the show, check out the Patreon page, where you can get exclusive content in return for helping make the channel even better. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.